Today we're going to talk about the concept of soundness as it's used in logic. And I should say up front that the term sound and terms like valid, they don't just mean true like they ordinarily do in English, in everyday English. They mean something special in logic. So try to keep that in mind as we go forward. It's a source of common confusion in logic, mixing up terms like valid and sound with true. Those are different. And it's not easy to understand the relationships between those concepts, soundness and validity and truth. They're all separate. And then the truth of the premises versus the truth of the conclusion of an argument. So what I found is useful for students is a formula that I invented called the Soundness formula, which will help us remember and work out the various relationships between these concepts. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is show you how that works, how to use it. So start with the labels in my formula here. S is sound, the argument's sound. V means that the argument's valid. And again, that just has something to do with the connection between the premises and the conclusion. It means that the premises would, if they're true, would guarantee the conclusion to be true. In other words, the premises, their truth taken together, would contradict denying the conclusion. Okay, there are different ways of thinking about that. But hopefully you've got the concept of validity under your belt a little bit. And then T sub P means that all the premises are true, not just one of them or some of them, but all of them are true. And then T sub C means that the conclusion is true. So what the formula then says is, first of all, the definition of soundness is this first part. A sound argument is one that is valid and has true premises, all true premises. Now, the truth of the conclusion is not part of the definition of soundness, but it does follow from the definition. So, whenever the definition is satisfied of soundness, whenever you have a valid argument and all the premises are true, it will follow that the conclusion is true, even though the definition of soundness says nothing about the conclusion itself. Okay, so that last part, the arrow in the T sub C, is not part of the definition of soundness. It's what soundness implies. So that's an important qualification. Now I want to give you a challenge before moving forward, proving the formula. I'm not going to do it in this lecture because I'm trying to save time, I'm trying to keep this pretty short, but also because it's good for you doing this the first time to try to work some things out for yourself. It's good for learning purposes and understanding purposes. So I'll give you a little hint in trying to prove the formula. First, write down the formula, the first part of the formula, the definition, soundness is validity plus truth of all premises. Then plug in for V the definition you learned about validity. What does that say? Write out the definition of it. Then combine that definition with the truth of all premises. Okay, then you got a sound argument. And then see what you can derive from all that, putting it all together. Putting the definition of soundness together with the definition of validity and seeing if you can see why the definition or the truth of the conclusion is going to follow from all that. Okay, so stop and try to work that out at some point. But what I want to do in this lecture is tell you first how to use the formula, and then we're going to look at some examples of it. So step one in using the formula is always to write it down. Just write down the formula. Okay? The second step is that we're going to use little check marks next to each part of the formula that is satisfied, that we know to be satisfied by a given argument. So if you know an argument is valid, you put a check by the V. If you know that it has all true premises, you can put a check by the T sub P. Okay? We're going to use X's and place it next to the parts of the argument that we know are not satisfied. So if you know you have an argument that's not sound, you can put an X by the S. Okay? Now, once you place all your check marks and X's next to the various parts in the formula you have written down, then you can just sort of try to work out what the formula tells you about the rest of the parts that you don't have checked or X'd. Now, if you have everything on one side of the equals checked, then you're able to check everything on the other side because it's an equals. If you do some things to one side, you can do it to the other. It doesn't matter whether you start with the left side of the equals or the right side. If you have everything checked on one, you can check it on the other. Okay? But note that it's different with the arrow. If you're looking at the left side of the arrow and you have it checked, the left side of the arrow, then you can check the right side because the arrow is pointing from the left to the right. You can go from the left to the right. But notice if the arrow is not pointing in two directions, it's not a bidirectional arrow. So the arrow does not tell you can move from right to left. If you check off the T sub C on the right, that arrow does not say you can go backwards. All right, so make sure you're going in the right direction. That's why I have an arrow there, not an equals, for that part of the formula. So let's just get some practice. That's always where the learning comes, is just looking at examples and practicing. So I'm going to give you a series of statements, and the questions are going to be whether the statements are true or false. And we're going to use a formula to work them out. So let's start with the claim that all sound arguments are valid. Well, first we're told that we're looking at sound arguments. So let's pretend our arguments are sound. And then the question is, are they going to be known to be valid? Oops, sorry. Mark that out. Okay, I don't have a good eraser here. But the question is it valid? All right. So all I know is that I have soundness checked off. The S is checked off. Now I know from my rules that I gave you that you're automatically able to check what's on the other side of the equal sign. And so can I tell that the argument's going to be valid? Yep, I checked it off. So the answer is yes, or true. All sound arguments are valid. Similarly, it would have been true if I said all sound arguments have all true premises, right? Because that's checked off true, too. And then all sound arguments have true conclusions. Get rid of that notification. So if I said all sound arguments have true conclusions, then that would have been checked off too. So this formula would work for all those examples. Actually, I have that as question too. So notice, every premise of a sound argument is true. So what it's saying is that if you have a sound argument, it's wondering whether all the premises are true. So it's wondering whether that holds. Okay. So we can work that out. If the left side of that equal sign is checked, I can check everything on the other side. And so, yep, I checked that all the premises are true. So that statement is true. Seeing how this works? All valid arguments have true premises. Well, we're looking at valid arguments, so let's check that off. And now the question is, do they have true premises? So we're looking at that part there. But notice that validity and truth of the premises are just two separate chunks here. I can't move from one to the other in the formula. So checking off the V tells me nothing about the truth of the premises. I don't know anything about those. So this is going to be false. No, you can't conclude that there are going to be true premises just because the argument's valid. Number 4, all valid arguments have true conclusions. So in other words, we're looking at valid arguments, so let's check that off. And the question is, do they have true conclusions? Do I know that? So we're looking at this part. So what does the formula tell me? Well, can I move to the other side of the arrow given what I know? Well, I don't have this part checked off. I don't know whether the premises are true. The statement does not tell me that. So can I move from there, following the arrow, to conclude that the conclusion is true? No. The formula doesn't allow me to make that move. So answer, false. Number 5. All valid arguments are sound. Again, we're looking at just valid arguments here. Those are all the arguments we're looking at, valid, so I can check that off. And the question is, are they sound? So I'm wondering about this part. Now, can I move from my check to check off the yes in the formula? Well, I don't know that all the premises are true yet. Nothing in that statement tells me that. So can I move from this side to that side to check off the yes? Well, remember, everything has to be checked off on one side in order to move to the other side of the equals. So I can't make that move. I only have one part of the right-hand side checked off. Okay? So the answer is no, or false. Number 6, every line of an argument is true. If every line of an argument is true. All right, so in other words, if the premises are true and the conclusion is true, every line, then it's valid. Is that true? Well, having the T sub P or the T sub C checked off just doesn't tell me anything about this part, right? Nothing allows me to get there in the formula. It's just a separate part of the formula. No arrow leading to it from something I have checked off. It's not on the other side of an equal sign where I have everything checked off. So no, I can't move there. False. If a valid argument has some true premises. Okay, so we're looking at valid arguments. I can check that off. Some true premises. Now look, I can't check that off because remember, T sub P means all premises are true. So I can't check that off. So the question is, can I conclude that it's sound? In other words, we're looking at whether this part is true, the yes. But since I don't know whether T sub P is checked off, I can't move from the formula to the other side of the equals. So the answer is false. Last question, hence we get fireworks. If all lines of an argument are true, so again, true premises and true conclusion, all lines, then it's sound. So in other words, we're wondering about the yes. Well, again, I don't know about validity here. I'm not told. So I don't have everything on one side checked off, and that means I can't move to the other side of the equal sign. So it's false. All right. So hopefully you found the formula useful. You see how it works. You might have to watch some of those examples again, play the video again to really get a feel for it, get the hang of it, and then try it on your own. Hopefully that helps you work out these relationships, to remember them between the truth of the premises, the truth of the conclusion, validity and soundness. And then if you have extra time, I would encourage you to go back and do that challenge question. See if you can prove the formula. Okay? So we're going to stop there. Thanks for listening.